The Tupolev Tu-2 was one of the most significant aircraft of the Soviet Union during the Second World War, a medium bomber designed in an atmosphere of both urgency and adversity, and later remembered as a platform that combined speed, payload, and adaptability in a way few other bombers of its era could achieve. Its origins went back to the late 1930s, when the Red Army Air Force analyzed its combat experiences in Spain and against Japanese forces in Mongolia and realized that existing bombers such as the SB and DB-3 were already obsolete in the face of faster fighters and stronger air defenses. Soviet aviation leaders concluded that they needed a new generation of bomber, fast enough to evade interception, durable enough to withstand battlefield punishment, and versatile enough to carry out tactical and operational missions. The design responsibility fell to the team led by Andrei Tupolev, who by that time was imprisoned during Stalin's purges and forced to work in a sharashka, a special prison design bureau, where some of the best engineers of the country were compelled to continue their work under guard. Within this strange environment, the concept that became the Tu-2 began life as the AN-T-58 project, later refined into a design known as Aircraft 103. The requirements were ambitious: a top speed rivaling contemporary fighters, a bomb load of at least a metric ton, good maneuverability, and defensive armament capable of deterring enemy fighters. The engineers envisioned an all-metal aircraft with mid-mounted wings, stressed skin construction, and an internal bomb bay to minimize drag. The aircraft was to be powered initially by Mikulin AM-37 inline engines, though this choice would later cause serious delays. Work proceeded despite shortages of materials and the difficult conditions of wartime evacuation, and Tupolev's team managed to produce a prototype by early 1941. When the first prototype flew, it astonished test pilots with its agility. Unlike most bombers of the period, it handled almost like a fighter, responsive and fast, capable of high-speed turns and dives. In tests, it reached more than 540 kilometers per hour, faster than many German bombers, and comparable to some fighters. Engineers had also devised a capacious bomb bay that allowed the Tu-2 to carry up to 3,000 kilograms of bombs under certain conditions, though normal loads were smaller. Defensive positions were placed in dorsal, ventral, and nose mounts, initially with SKAS machine guns, but later upgraded to heavier armament. The prototype period, however, was plagued by engine problems. The AM-37 engines suffered overheating and reliability issues, and production capacity for them was limited. As a result, the design was modified to accept other power plants, including the AM-38, and eventually the Shvetsov Ash-82 radial engine, which proved to be the most reliable and powerful choice. These changes forced extensive redesign of nacelles, cooling systems, and aerodynamics, slowing the program at a time when the German invasion of June 1941 put the entire Soviet aircraft industry under immense strain. Factories had to be evacuated eastward, prototypes were dispersed, and many programs were canceled outright in favor of mass production of simpler aircraft like the Il-2 Sturmovik. The Tu-2 narrowly escaped this fate thanks to strong advocacy from senior officers who recognized its potential as a high-speed bomber. By 1942, limited production was authorized, though numbers remained small until 1943. The first operational units received the Tu-2 in late 1942 and early 1943. Pilots quickly realized that they had in their hands a machine unlike previous Soviet bombers. It was fast enough to evade many interceptors, stable in a dive, and could carry a versatile array of bombs for tactical and operational missions. Crews described it as a bomber that could fight back, a reflection of its maneuverability and defensive armament. In its early combat use, the Tu-2 was assigned to strike railway junctions, bridges, supply depots, and concentrations of enemy forces. Its speed allowed it to approach targets with reduced warning, drop bombs accurately, and withdraw before German fighters could organize interceptions. The aircraft also proved durable in combat, with many instances of damaged machines returning to base despite heavy flak or fighter attacks. However, deployment in small numbers limited its overall impact during 1943. Only as production increased in 1944 did the Tu-2 become a regular sight on the Eastern Front. Its contribution was most visible in Operation Bagration in the summer of 1944, when large numbers of Tu-2s bombed German logistics hubs, rail lines, and defensive strongpoints, paving the way for Soviet ground offensives. Tactics evolved rapidly. Tu-2 formations often flew with fighter escort from Yak-9s or LA-5s to protect against Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf FW-190s. Crews developed shallow dive profiles for precision bombing, low-level attack runs against convoys, and night bombing operations against cities and depots. The bomber's defensive armament was upgraded during production to heavy machine guns in dorsal and tail positions, giving it a fighting chance against attacking fighters. Soviet commanders appreciated its flexibility. The Tu-2 could be used as a medium bomber, a dive bomber, or even adapted as a heavy fighter in some experimental configurations. Maintenance crews, though, faced challenges with engine reliability and structural wear in the harsh conditions of frontline airfields, but the aircraft's robust design allowed it to remain serviceable with proper care. As more units converted to the type, its reputation grew, and by the last year of the war it had become one of the most respected Soviet aircraft in service. Variants appeared throughout the war and after. The Tu-2S was the main production model, equipped with Shvetsov ASH-82FN radial engines that delivered both power and reliability. The Tu-2D featured longer range for deep strikes. Reconnaissance versions carried cameras in place of bombs, while others experimented with torpedo delivery for naval use, though these saw limited action. Post-war development produced training versions like the Tu-2, night fighters with radar equipment, and prototypes with turboprop, or even early jet engines as the Soviet Union experimented with new propulsion. The adaptability of the Tu-2 reflected the strength of its basic design and the willingness of Tupolev's bureau to innovate. After 1945, the Tu-2 remained a standard medium bomber in the Soviet Air Force for more than a decade. It was exported to Allied nations including China, where it was built under license and served well into the 1970s, as well as to Poland, Hungary, North Korea, and other states within the Soviet sphere. In these air forces, it carried out not only bombing missions, but also training, reconnaissance, and secondary roles, prolonging its operational life long after piston-engine bombers had been phased out in most Western countries. The Tu-2's global impact lay not only in its exports, but in the lessons it provided for future Soviet aircraft design. It demonstrated the importance of speed and maneuverability in medium bombers and influenced later designs that emphasized versatility and adaptability. Though it was eventually replaced by jet bombers like the Ilyushin Il-28, the Tu-2 held an important transitional role, bridging the era of piston engines and the dawn of jet power. Its cultural legacy is preserved in museums across Russia, China, and Eastern Europe, where surviving examples stand as reminders of the ingenuity and resilience of Soviet aviation during the darkest years of the war. Veterans who flew the Tu-2 recalled it as a machine that gave them confidence, an aircraft that could deliver powerful blows against the enemy and still bring its crew home. Historians today regard it as the best Soviet bomber of the Second World War, a counterpart to aircraft like the British Mosquito and the German Ju-88, combining speed, firepower, and adaptability. Beyond combat, the Tu-2 also played roles in testing and research. Some airframes were used to trial new avionics, engines, or weapon systems. Others were adapted for transport, training, or utility roles. A few were employed in secret research projects involving radar or atmospheric studies, showing the aircraft's versatility. Planned upgrades such as fitting turboprops or new wing designs sometimes reached prototype stage but were abandoned as jet propulsion advanced. Nevertheless, these lesser-known chapters highlight the value of the Tu-2 as a platform that could be reshaped for multiple tasks. In the end, the Tupolev Tu-2 was more than a bomber. It was a symbol of Soviet engineering persistence under adversity, an aircraft born in prison design bureaus and carried through war by determined crews and ground staff. Its long service life across continents, its influence on doctrine and design, and its enduring presence in aviation history books secure its place among the great combat aircraft of the mid-20th century. The further evolution of the Tupolev Tu-2 reflected both the rapid changes in aviation technology during the final years of the Second World War and the Soviet Union's attempts to extract maximum versatility from an aircraft that had proven itself reliable and effective in combat. Once production stabilized and the type began entering frontline service in significant numbers, engineers and commanders quickly sought to improve it, expand its operational envelope, and adapt it to new missions that extended far beyond its original medium bomber role. Several improved series were introduced, each addressing specific needs identified at the front. The Tu-2S became the main wartime production model, refined with stronger defensive armament and better armor protection, responding to combat experience against German fighters. Subsequent refinements included the Tu-2VS and Tu-2M variants, integrating improved engines such as the ASH-82FN, which offered more power and reliability, while optimizing aerodynamics for higher speed and greater altitude performance. The Soviet Air Force was determined to keep pace with the Luftwaffe, and by late 1944, the Tu-2 in its upgraded forms could match or surpass the performance of enemy medium bombers while carrying heavier loads and delivering them with greater precision. The versatility of the design soon became apparent. Beyond level bombing, the Tu-2 proved effective in low-level strike missions, dive bombing attacks, and even night operations. Its bomb bay could accommodate a wide range of ordnance, from general-purpose bombs to specialized anti-armor and incendiary loads, and the hardpoints allowed the carriage of rockets, expanding its capability as a ground attack aircraft. This flexibility made it a valuable asset during Soviet offensives in 1944 and 1945, where it supported major operations such as the Vistula Oder Offensive and the Battle of Berlin. Pilots appreciated its responsiveness and relatively forgiving handling, a remarkable achievement for a twin-engine bomber, and many combat reports praised its ability to absorb battle damage and still return crews safely to base. Production numbers rose steadily, and by the war's end, several thousand Tu-2s had been delivered, establishing it as the backbone of Soviet medium bomber forces alongside the Petlyakov Pe-2. After 1945, the Tu-2 did not disappear with the peace. Instead, it entered a second phase of its career as the Soviet Union reorganized its military aviation for the Cold War. Jet propulsion was already on the horizon, but in the immediate post-war years, piston-engine aircraft like the Tu-2 continued to play an important role. They were produced in additional series, incorporating modifications for reconnaissance, training, and specialized bombing tasks. The Tu-2R reconnaissance variant was fitted with cameras and additional fuel tanks, enabling long-range photographic missions that contributed to Soviet intelligence gathering in the late 1940s. Trainers such as the Tu-2 allowed new crews to learn multi-engine handling, while experimental versions tested heavy armament, including cannon installations and guided munitions concepts. Internationally, the Tu-2 spread to Allied air forces within the Socialist bloc and beyond. China received a number of Tu-2s, which were operated by the People's Liberation Army Air Force and saw service in the early years of the Cold War, even being employed during the Korean War in limited roles. Other nations aligned with the Soviet Union also obtained the type, further extending its operational life and influence. The longevity of the Tu-2 was a testament to its robust design and the foresight of its creators. Even as jets like the Il-28 and early Tupolev jet bombers replaced piston types, the Tu-2 continued to serve into the 1950s in various support and secondary roles. In terms of legacy, the aircraft played a crucial role in shaping Soviet bomber doctrine. It demonstrated the effectiveness of a fast, medium bomber capable of precision strikes at tactical depth, bridging the gap between light dive bombers and heavy long-range strategic machines. Lessons learned from its development and operational use directly informed later designs, including both jet-powered bombers and attack aircraft. It also carried symbolic weight, representing not only Soviet technological resilience during wartime, but also the triumph of Andrei Tupolev's design bureau, which had overcome immense obstacles, including his imprisonment, to deliver a world-class combat aircraft under desperate conditions. Today, surviving Tu-2s are rare, but preserved in museums across Russia and former Allied states, where they stand as reminders of the extraordinary pressures and innovations of the Second World War. Veterans who flew the aircraft consistently describe it as dependable, powerful, and versatile, a machine that gave them confidence in the most dangerous missions. Historians place it alongside the best medium bombers of the conflict, and although overshadowed internationally by Western counterparts like the Mosquito or B-25 Mitchell, within the Soviet Union it was held in equal esteem. Its legacy extends beyond technical achievements, serving as a symbol of endurance, adaptation, and the ability of Soviet industry to rise to the challenge of modern mechanized warfare. Even its unseen chapters, such as experimental versions that never entered mass production or specialized roles like remote-controlled drone trials, reflect the ambition and constant search for innovation that defined Soviet aviation during and after the war. The Tu-2 story is therefore not only one of a successful combat aircraft, but also of a broader industrial and technological movement that shaped the future of military aviation in the USSR and beyond, leaving a permanent mark on the history of 20th century air warfare. Beyond its widely acknowledged role as a frontline medium bomber, the Tupolev Tu-2 had many lesser-known aspects of its service history that highlight both the ingenuity of Soviet engineers and the adaptability of the aircraft to unexpected challenges. During the war itself, a number of Tu-2 units were tasked with unconventional missions that went beyond standard bombing runs. In some cases, they were used for night harassment raids, operating in small formations to strike German troop concentrations and supply depots under cover of darkness, a tactic that disrupted enemy logistics and kept soldiers under constant psychological pressure. Their speed and bomb load made them more effective than the older Polikarpov Po-2 biplanes that carried out similar missions, giving Soviet commanders a heavier night attack option. In addition to bombing, Tu-2s were sometimes adapted for anti-shipping strikes in the Baltic and Black Sea theaters. Fitted with specialized bombs or aerial mines, they attacked German convoys, ports, and naval bases, contributing to the disruption of Axis maritime operations. These missions were dangerous, as low-level attacks against ships exposed the bombers to concentrated anti-aircraft fire, but the Tu-2's ability to carry significant payloads and perform high-speed egress made it suitable for the task. Another lesser-known use involved attempts to employ the aircraft as a heavy fighter or gunship. Several experimental versions were equipped with large-caliber cannons in the nose, intended to give them the firepower to intercept enemy bombers or conduct devastating strafing attacks. Although these conversions showed promise in firepower, they were limited in practicality due to weight, recoil issues, and the need to preserve bombing capability. Nevertheless, such experiments revealed the Soviet interest in exploring multi-role applications for every valuable airframe during the war. The Tu-2 also became a testbed for early guided weapon concepts. In the closing stages of the war and the immediate post-war years, Soviet engineers investigated the possibility of arming bombers with guided bombs and experimental rockets. Some Tu-2s were modified to carry and release early prototypes of precision-guided munitions, an ambitious project that foreshadowed the guided weapons revolution of the Cold War. Although most of these trials remained experimental and did not see combat deployment, they demonstrated that the Tu-2 was robust and versatile enough to serve as a platform for cutting-edge research. In the realm of reconnaissance, the Tu-2R variant deserves special mention. Long-range photographic missions often required aircraft to penetrate deep into hostile or disputed territory, relying on speed and altitude to evade interception. The Tu-2R carried additional fuel and advanced camera equipment, making it one of the Soviet Union's primary strategic reconnaissance tools until newer jet-powered platforms appeared. Some of these missions remain classified or only partially documented, but surviving accounts suggest Tu-2 reconnaissance flights extended over Eastern Europe, the Balkans, and later into areas of interest during the early Cold War. Beyond military service, the Tu-2 also played a role in training and education. The Tu-2 trainer version allowed student pilots and navigators to gain experience on a twin-engine, high-performance aircraft before transitioning to newer bombers. Many Soviet aircrew who would later fly the Il-28 jet bomber or larger long-range machines first trained on Tu-2s, making it a bridge between wartime piston technology and the jet age. In China, the Tu-2's story took a unique turn. The aircraft not only served in combat roles, but also in propaganda and symbolic functions. For the People's Liberation Army Air Force, possession of modern bombers like the Tu-2 symbolized the transition from a revolutionary guerrilla force to a structured national military power. Tu-2s flew in national celebrations, air parades, and demonstrations of strength, reinforcing their role as both a weapon and a political tool. In terms of longevity, while most Soviet Tu-2s were retired by the mid-1950s, their service life abroad sometimes extended much longer. Chinese Tu-2s remained operational well into the 1960s, with some converted for non-combat roles such as target towing and training. A few even underwent local modifications, reflecting attempts by Chinese engineers to prolong the usefulness of the type despite the increasing dominance of jet technology. There are also accounts of Tu-2s being used in experimental drone control projects. In the post-war years, the Soviet Union experimented with converting older aircraft into unmanned target drones or remote-controlled bombers for hazardous test missions. Some Tu-2s were adapted for these roles, allowing engineers to study remote piloting technology and weapons testing without endangering crews. These projects remained relatively obscure, but they represent yet another dimension of the aircraft's adaptability. Historically, the Tu-2 has sometimes been overshadowed by Western counterparts such as the British Mosquito or the American B-25 Mitchell, both of which became famous worldwide. Yet within the Soviet Union, the Tu-2 was held in high regard and considered the equal of its peers. Its relatively late introduction meant that it did not achieve the same legendary status as earlier Soviet types like the Il-2 Sturmovik, but among those who flew and maintained it, the bomber was remembered as reliable, powerful, and modern. Today, preserved examples in museums such as the Central Air Force Museum in Monino, near Moscow, serve as rare physical reminders of this significant aircraft. Restoration efforts in Russia and China have aimed to maintain surviving Tu-2s in static display condition, though none are believed to remain airworthy. For aviation historians, the Tu-2 represents a critical link in the evolution of Soviet bomber design, bridging the piston engine traditions of the Second World War and the jet-powered doctrines of the Cold War. Its design lessons influenced not only subsequent Tupolev projects, but also the broader philosophy of Soviet air power, which emphasized adaptability, ruggedness, and the capacity for rapid technological upgrades. Even its unseen and forgotten chapters, from cannon-armed prototypes to reconnaissance secrets, underscore how one airframe could serve as the foundation for innovation across multiple fields. Ultimately, the Tu-2's importance lies not only in the missions it flew, but also in the vision it embodied: that Soviet aviation, despite wartime devastation and industrial hardship, could produce a world-class bomber that rivaled the best of its time and laid the groundwork for future generations of combat aircraft.